Hello, Bobby Towards a Frightbox Recording here, answering viewer questions, episode 1. So in this series, I'll be answering your questions, whether it has to do with recording, mixing, attracting clients, anything related to audio, and maybe certain things that aren't related to audio. Now, last week, I received a ton of great questions from my email subscribers, so I figured I'd start off this series with these questions. And I just want to say, if I don't get to your question within this video, stay tuned because I will get to it eventually within one of these upcoming videos. As long as I keep getting great questions, I will be sprinkling these videos in on the channel pretty regularly. Okay, our first question here comes from Barry. Morning, Bobby. Just finished clearing out 18 inches of snow. Love living on the East Coast. Believe me, Barry, I know exactly how you feel. I've been shoveling what feels like every single day of the last 2 weeks. We've gone years with barely any snow, and now I feel like we're getting snow every day. How do you deal with room resonances with acoustic instruments? I'm recording an acoustic trio and the fiddle is giving me fits. It sounds good raw, but as soon as I add compression, there are noticeable harsh frequencies poking out. If I go in and surgically reduce the offending frequencies, it changes the timbre of the fiddle. I then have to add an exciter to add back up the upper mids and above. Am I on the right track, or do you have a better strategy? Well, Barry, your issue is very common, especially when you're recording within a home studio. Now, without getting overly technical, when you're recording in a regular room, like in a house, you generally have parallel walls. And this is exacerbated when you're recording in a smaller space, unfortunately. I deal with this a lot when I have to record vocals in like a home studio, if I'm working with a band and we're working within just a room without any treatment at all. A lot of times there'll be a lot of room spill in the mic, or there'll just be a lot of buildup at specific frequencies that I don't really want. Now, in my opinion, the best way to go about this is to deal with it at the source and to not rely on crazy notching and adding an exciter. That's just my opinion. But the good news is that you could deal with this at the source in a relatively simple way. I simply deaden my space with just everyday household items. Like, for example, where I am right now in my basement is not acoustically treated, but it's relatively dead. I've tracked vocals down here and acoustic instruments without any problem because I have carpeting, and back there my couch absorbs a lot of the sound. Also, things like bookshelves and curtains help a lot. In other words, the more absorption you add to your room, even if it's not acoustic treatment, the better off you'll be and the less you'll deal with a lot of these frequencies that build up. I notice I have the most trouble when I'm in a bare room, especially a smaller bare room. So again, like down here, if I clap, it's relatively dead. Whereas upstairs in my office, if I tried to record acoustic guitar, there'd be a lot of resonances and a lot of weird stuff happening that would be next to impossible to remove in the mix. So in short, I wouldn't rely on crazy notching. Not to say that you shouldn't EQ your instruments and maybe do a little bit of EQ if it needs it, but definitely don't rely on a saturator or an exciter to help add frequencies back in. That sounds way overkill in my opinion. Barry, thanks for your question and hopefully that helps. All right, moving on to question number 2. And this is from Ronaldo. Thank you for this marvelous initiative. Your channel is one of the best and I don't miss a single video. That's awesome, man. Thanks for watching, Ronaldo. What I would like to know is your approach to minimizing masking issues and increase mono compatibility when you have 2 guitars recorded left and right and they were tracked already distorted. So you wouldn't have a chance to select another amp sim or IR, change settings, etc. Nor record with a different pickup, different guitar, or anything. You just have the 2 recorded and distorted tracks and that's it. Hope we can have a video about it sometime. Well, Ronaldo, thanks for your question, and it's a good one. Now, when it comes to the whole mono compatibility thing, I found that there's really 2 camps that most producers fall within when it comes to this issue. You have guys that obsess about mono compatibility, and then you have guys like me that don't really think about it much. In other words, I rarely check my mix in mono. Now, for example, if you have 2 microphones on a single source and you want to make sure that they're not kind of phasing each other out, and one is panned in the left speaker and the other is panned in the right, and you want to check mono compatibility that way, that's something that I will do from time to time if it's something I haven't recorded, but I don't worry about it when it comes to rhythm guitar tracks. I've even heard of people panning their guitars slightly in because they're worried about mono compatibility, but I honestly wouldn't worry about it. But I gotta say this, you are right. If you do vary your guitar or your amp or cab or impulse response, you are gonna end up with a wider sound that will maybe be a little more mono compatible, but again, it's not something I ever worry about. If you're stuck with the two guitar tones that you have, maybe you could EQ one side slightly different, like maybe cut a little bit of 1K out of the one side and boost a little bit of 1K out of the other. But again, it's not something that I would worry about too much. Just make sure you get the guitar sitting nicely in the mix in relation to the rest of your other instruments. That's what's gonna matter most, in my opinion. And this is something that I'll definitely be covering in future videos more in depth. Okay, next question, and this one is from Lucas. Hi Bobby, working in a small project studio, how do you handle recording drums in a small sounding space? Especially, how do you handle cymbal bleed and room mics that sound like a trash can because of the room? I've recorded drums once in a big open room and suddenly mic placement became easy and effortless, and I actually could use the room mics as room mics without having to load a fancy IR, but usually don't have the luxury because rooms like that cost money. Lucas, I love this question, and it's one of my favorite things to work around. I know I'm weird. I actually like being challenged when I record and coming up with different ways to kind of get around, a sounding room or using cheap gear or whatever. Now, first of all, if your room is overly ridiculously splashy, much like with the issue with room resonances that I talked about earlier, you're gonna wanna deaden your room with some form of absorption. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to spend $1 million on acoustic treatment. Things like carpeting or maybe some furniture will do a great job of helping to kill those extra splashy reflections. But often after deadening your space, you end up with a room that's just very dead and boring sounding. And my advice to this would be to actually mic, when it comes to room mics, mic the walls instead of sticking your room mics pointed at the drums. When you're in a bigger space, it's a lot easier to end up with a nice open sounding drum room sound from your room mics, but when you're in a small space, you really want to avoid as much cymbal spillage, like you mentioned, as possible. So some tricks that I use, like I mentioned, is I deaden my space with just everyday items like carpeting, beanbag chairs, maybe a sofa. And to help my room sound bigger and to eliminate cymbal spillage as much as possible in my actual room mics is to keep my room mics nice and low and pointed away from my kit at the actual walls. And I also want to mention this, generally hi-hats are a huge problem that people have when they mic their drums. And an easy way to remedy that is to close mic your main crashes and to not worry about miking your hi-hat. There will be plenty of hi-hat in your overheads and room mics. That'll help with harshness as well. So hopefully that helps and improves your drum sounds while recording in a space. And I just want to say this, don't let that stop you. I love recording drums in weird spaces that people would never think to record drums in. I've recorded drums in really small bars, small splashy sounding basements, garages, rehearsal rooms. And if you follow the principles I just laid out for you, you'll be good to go. Okay, moving on to the next question. And this question comes from Gilherm. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Forgive me if I'm not. Speaking about your products, I see that you have a "I'm not trying to sell you anything" approach. Is this part of your strategy? I'm saying it because I had to do some research before finding your mixing course actually. I was about to comment on one of your videos about it, that it would be awesome to have a detailed course before finding Frightbox Academy. Have a nice day, my friend. Cheers. Well, Gilherm, that's a great question. And yes, you are correct. I do have courses available on my website, both for full production and mixing. Now, the reason you probably never heard of it is because I don't talk about it on YouTube, because I'm on YouTube to give away information for free to help people get great results within their studios immediately. My online courses are different in that they're in depth and I cover one song, like for example, mixing a song from start to finish over the course of 6 hours. So you watch the entire process in real time. And my full production course is similar in that I produce an entire song, but again, it's very in-depth and meant to be consumed one bite at a time over a long period of time. If someone's serious and interested in this sort of thing, they will eventually find my website and check out my courses. So for me, they're two separate entities. I have my online courses for people that are really serious and really want to dive deep with me, and I have my YouTube content to help people get great results immediately. If this is something you're interested in, I will leave a link to my online courses below in this video's description, and you can check them out on my website. Great question. Okay, this next question comes from Mr. Kyle Straight. Is there a way to know if your guitar DIs are usable? I don't seem to get the results that others do. I use an Apogee Duet and my tracks sound thin and distant, regardless of which IR I use. Well, Kyle, thank you for your question. Now, the way I determine a quality DI is pretty simple. I want to make sure it's crisp, clean, and well played. In other words, if I listen to the DI, whether it's coming from a guitar or a bass and it sounds muffled, or like the strings are dead, or like the performances aren't jiving with each other and there's conflicts between the guitar tracks or guitar and bass tracks, then I know there might be something up with my DI tracks. Now, as far as your tone sounding distant, that might be the amp sim you're using and maybe even the IR you're using. Now this can be a result of extremely dead strings, but I think you would notice that even before you're plugging your guitar into your rig. But just keep in mind, when it comes to a quality DI, you're looking for a nice, crisp, clean performance that sounds like fresh strings are being used and that the performance is well played and or edited. Now, a lot of people ask me about this topic, so I'll be covering it in future videos more in depth. But in a nutshell, that's what I would pay attention to. Okay, and our final question of the day comes from Mr. Jordan Neville. What was the first step you took to build a client list? Great question. I think my skills are almost to the point where I can get started, but my experience is limited to unreleased demos, which I can't include in my portfolio. I plan to do a handful of free projects to gain experience and build a portfolio. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again, Jordan. Now, Jordan, this is a great question and I can get really into depth on this topic and even cover it over the course of many videos, but I'll give you the short version and what I would do if I were looking for clients today. Now, if I can go back in time and talk to my younger self, the first thing I would tell myself when it comes to attracting clients and doing this as a business is that all clients are not created equal. In other words, some clients are super talented and prepared and are a dream to work with. And then you'll have clients that are unprepared, they don't know their songs, and they'll nickel and dime you to death. And every single combination in between. And the other thing I would tell myself is that birds of a feather flock together. In other words, the bands that you want to work with that are going to push your career forward generally hang out together. And the bands you want to avoid like the plague, again, hang out together. So what I would do is this: if you're just starting out and you want to build up a decent client list, I would make friends with a decent band in your local area. Whether you know them through maybe the music scene or you're just going up to them cold at a show, just get to know them and form a relationship with this specific band. Offer them maybe a free single and show them one of your good sounding demos. Now, no, you will not be making money right off the bat, but believe me, if you get this band in your studio and you deliver a great product, even if it's for free, they will more often than not ask for more songs. And here's the thing, the bands that they're friends with will eventually hear their demo. All bands listen to each other's work, believe me. And if you've done a decent job, you will get inquiries from other bands. It's sort of like a web or a tree. You network with these different clients and then other clients know other clients. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up the quality of clients to you is because this is something that I was completely oblivious to when I started. I would record anyone when I started, and I ended up wasting so much time working with bands that were really not worth working with. Now, I know this might sound harsh, but think about it like this. If there's a band that doesn't even take themselves seriously to come into the studio prepared and they nickel and dime you to death, are they really gonna appreciate the effort that you put into their project? Probably not, at least in my experience. And what happens is when you spend time with these bands, you will attract more bands like that, which will not help you build a great client list, believe me. I wish I could go back in time and teach myself this, but unfortunately, hindsight is 20/20. So again, to sum it up and just put it simply, focus on doing a free project with a band that you might be friends with that have their stuff together. You will be amazed at how that seed that you plant will often sprout into something awesome. In my opinion, that is by far the best way and the fastest way to build up a rock solid client list that you could eventually live off of if you wanted to. So Jordan, thanks for your question. And remember, if you're consistent and you stick with it, you will get there. So there it is, the very first Frightbox viewer questions answered video. And again, I will be sprinkling these in regularly as long as I have these great questions coming in. And just as a reminder, if you sent me an email last week with a question and I didn't get to it today, I will get to it in one of these upcoming videos. I just didn't want this video to be 2 hours long. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And you can download my custom guitar cab impulse response for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description. Download it, load it into your favorite amp sim plugin, and get right to dialing in a killer metal guitar tone with absolute ease. Till next time, happy mixing.